How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Daled, Daf 94 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends. What are we doing here? Right, Tzadi Daled. Yeah, it's awesome. Tzadi Daled, BavaMetzia is awesome. We're going to wrap up the 7th parak of Masechta BavaMetzia. And we're going to start the 8th parak, Hashoyol es Apara. Great stuff. What do you want me to tell you? I wonder if this is also going to be a big daf. I guess the last few days have been kind of big-ish, I guess. Although yesterday, I think in the end, wasn't that long. All right, what do you want me to tell you? Stay B'Shtar. Here we go. We're going to start on Daf Tzadi Daled Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, about 4 lines into the page. Masna Shemechinam Lios Potter Me Hashvuit. So a Shemechinam can make a T'nai with the Balabayas, with the Mafkid, to be Potter from swearing. Right? So normally, of course, a Shemechinam, if anything happens, let's say it gets stolen, so he can swear that he wasn't negligent, and then he doesn't have to pay. Right? Shomer Chinim is potter for Gneva Vaveda, but he does have to swear. Okay. So now, if the Shomer Chinim, however, says that, look, I'll watch your thing, but if it gets stolen, I don't want to swear. I don't want to swear. So he works it out with the Balabais in advance, right? Masna Shomer Chinim Lios Potter Mishvut, that he can make a condition, a T'nai, with the Balabais that if it gets stolen, if anything happens, he's not going to have to swear. V'ashoyel lios poter milishalim, and a shoyel can stipulate that he doesn't want to have to pay. Right? Of course, a borrower is chayav for everything. Right? A shoyel is chayav because kol hanoah shelo. He's the only one getting benefit. Right? The lender doesn't get any benefit from borrowing out his thing. So all of the benefit goes to the borrower, and therefore the highest amount of responsibility the borrower has the highest level of responsibility. He has to pay for onus, he has to pay for gneva, vaveda, everything. So if he stipulates with the balabais that I don't want to have to pay anything, okay, beseder. Right? Vashal lios potem milishal. No se socher v'asocher, and a shomer socher. A socher, assuming that a socher is like a shomer socher, lios peturin mishvua. So they could make a stipulation that they'll be potter from swearing by ones, right? Because a shomer socher by ones can swear that it was in fact ones, and then he doesn't have to pay. Umilashalim, and also he could stipulate that if it gets stolen or lost, gneva vaveda, he won't have to pay, because normally a shomer secha would be responsible for gneva ba'aveda, but he could stipulate that he doesn't want to have to. Doesn't have to. He could stipulate that he won't have to pay. Now says the Mishnah, Kol amasna mashakosa b'Torah tno bottle. Okay, anybody who makes a t'nai, anybody who makes a stipulation based on something that's written in the Torah, the Gemara is going to ask, well, how did we just say that you could stipulate for a shomer chinam not to have to swear? I thought shomer chinam has to swear. But anyways, it says the Mishnah, if anybody makes a stipulation against that which is written in the Torah, to know a bottle, his condition is bottle. You can't be masna mashakos b'Torah. V'chol t'nai sheyesh, where am I? V'chol t'nai sheyesh ma'ase b'tchilaso, to know a bottle. And any t'nai, any stipulation, any condition that has a ma'ase at the beginning is bottle. Meaning, the way that if you imagine like JavaScript, right? So in JavaScript, you write the condition, and then inside of the block of the condition, you write the action, right? So if condition, so then do this action. Okay, the condition has to come first. Unlike, let's say, like Ruby, you can write do this action if this condition. Right, so this is like a JavaScript kind of thing, right? That you have to say the condition first, right? So any v'chol t'nai sheyesh ma'ase b'tchilaso, any condition that starts out with the do this, if that, to know a bottle. It's not, you're going to have to forget about the if that, you're going to have to do this, right? Meaning, if you say do this, if that, so the condition, the if, it's like it doesn't exist. That's not the way that you make a condition. The condition doesn't exist, and instead what you're left with is do this. So you're going to have to do it. The condition's irrelevant. What you have to do is you have to say if this, so then that. Okay, meaning you have to do the condition first. And any condition that is possible to be mekuyim, right, that it's possible to do, so then it's a valid condition. If it's, however, an impossible thing, like, if you can jump to the moon, so then a certain stipulation, so then forget it, right? The stipulation's irrelevant. It doesn't exist. You're gonna have to do whatever the condition was, right? Whatever the action was, right? But if you jump to the moon, I'll give you $100. Well, jumping to the moon is irrelevant, so give him $100. Okay, so again, kol she'efshar lo l'kaimo, any condition that is possible to do, right? She'efshar l'kaimo b'sofa v'isnimo mitchilaso, and then you, right, anything that you can ultimately do, and you make it conditional on doing that thing, so to know kaim, it's a valid condition. But if it would be something that's impossible to do, then it's irrelevant. Okay, says the Gemara, Amai, why can, right, the Mishnah had said, Masna shomer chinam lios patu mishvu. Right, the Mishnah had said that a shomer chinam can make a t'nai with a balabais, that he's not going to have to swear. If it gets stolen or something lost, doesn't have to swear. But Amai, Masna mashakos batoru. He's making a condition against that which is written in the Torah. The Torah says he has to swear, and you're making a condition, I don't have to swear. And if you make a condition against that which is written in the Torah, it's irrelevant to know bottle. Well, the ratio of our Mishnah that says that a shemechinam can make a condition that he won't have to swear, or that a shoyl that he won't have to pay, etc. That's Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar who says b'davar shebimamin, that when it comes to monetary things, to know kaim, the condition would be valid. So you can be masna mashakos b'torah when it comes to maminis, when it comes to financial things. The Tanis, we learn in the Brisa, Omer leisha, if a fellow says to a fellow, Hariyat mekudeshes li, you are betrothed to me, al manas she'ein lich olai sheksus ve'ona. We've seen this before, under the condition that I will not be responsible for, I believe, food, clothing, and beer. Hare zo mikudeshes utno bottle divrei Meir. So Meir says that's preposterous. You can't make, right? The Torah says that the husband is responsible for sherak susava onasala yigra. I think, is that not what the pasuk says? Right, the Torah says explicitly that a husband is responsible for sherak sus and ona, and therefore Reb Meir says that he can't. If he says the condition is irrelevant, it's deleted, it doesn't exist, and all you're left with is Hariyat Mikudeshesli, and therefore she's Mikudeshes, and as for the stipulation, it doesn't exist, it's irrelevant. Rabbi Yehuda Amar says, Rabbi Yehuda, b'davar shebimamun t'no kaim. Look, when it comes to financial things, such as clothing, and I think maybe food as well, I guess food and clothing, t'no kaim, the t'nai would be relevant for that. Ona is not, but for the financial aspects, it would be a valid stipulation, because you can be masna mashakos b'torah when it comes to davar sheb'mamun. Okay, so therefore we want to say that in our Mishnah, when we say masna shomachinam lios potu mishvueh, because that's talking about maminis, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Even though it's masna mashakos b'torah, when it comes to maminis, it's okay. Umimotzis mukmas lok Rabbi Yehuda, but can you really say that the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda? Ema Seifa. But then the Mishnah continues and says, Kol hamasna mashakos b'torah t'no bottle. That anybody who is mashna mashakos b'torah, anybody who makes a condition makes a stipulation against that which is written in the Torah, Tano batal. The Tanai is absolutely batal. Asan Reb Meir. That's the opinion of Reb Meir. Halakasha, it's no problem. La'olam Reb Yehuda. No. Really, it is Reb Yehuda v'seifa b'davar she'eno shalmamin. Now, when the Mishnah says Kol mashna amashakos b'Torah Tano batal, it is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and it's specifically talking about things that are not mumminous. When it comes to mumminous, it would be Tano kaim. When we say Tano batal, it's things that are not mumminous. Okay, but if we continue, Kol Tanai sheyesh bo maise b'tchilaso, any stipulation that starts off with the maise, starts off with the action, and then gets to the condition after stating the action, Tano batal. So we say the Tanai is batal. You have to first mention the condition, and only afterwards the action that it is that will happen if the condition is satisfied. Right. So again, Kol Tanai sheyesh bo maise b'tchilaso Tano batal. Man shamislei de islei osvar. Whose opinion is it that if you say the action first, it's batal? Reb Meir. Answer is that is the opinion of Reb Meir. That if you say the maisa first, it's batal. The Tani is within the brayso. Abu Chalafta ish kfar chananya omer mishum Reb Meir Tanai kodem lemaisa, that the condition must precede the maisa, the action. How is it Tanai? And that would be a proper Tanai. Maisa kodem l'tanai, but if the action comes first before the condition, ain't Tanai. That is not a valid Tanai. So we see that is Reb Meir. So Elikula Reb Meir. Okay, rather forget it. Let's go back. It's all Reb Meir. Okay, so obviously when we say that that the condition must be before the action, that's Reb Meir. When we say Kol Amasna Mashkos B'Torah Tano batal, also Reb Meir. Okay, then what's pshat with when we say that Masna Shomachinim Dios Potum Mishvur, that a Shomachinim can stipulate that he's not going to have to swear? V'shani achad meikar lo shibed nafshe. No, what's going on in the Mishnah when we say in the ratio when we say Masna Shomachinim Dios Potum Mishvur, that a Shomachinim can stipulate that he's going to be potter from swearing. Here's the thing. It's more subtle than that. It's not that the Shomer Chinam is stipulating that he's going to be potter from swearing. He's not allowed to do that. A Shomer Chinam has to swear. If he's a Shomer Chinam, he has to swear. He can't make a condition against that because that would be Masna Mashkosa B'Torah. However, this is what he's saying to the Balabayas. The Balabayas says, hey, can you watch my cow or something? He says, look, I'm not interested in being a Shomer Chinam. Because if I'm a Shomer Chinam, so then I'm going to have to swear, and I don't want to have to swear. So I'm not interested in being Shomer Chinam. Look, if you want to leave your cow with me, fine. If anything happens to you, I take no responsibility. I'm not swearing. I'm not nothing. I'm not a Shomer Chinam. I'm not a nothing. Call me whatever you want. You know, if you want to leave your cow with me, leave it. You know, at your own risk. You're responsible for everything. I'm not swearing. I'm not nothing. Right? I'm not doing the whole Shomer Chinam thing. So if that's the case, so he's not a Shomer Chinam, and therefore he can say, look, if he's a Shomer Chinam, then he has to swear, and he can't stipulate that he's not going to swear as a Shomer Chinam. Shomer Chinam has to swear, but he could say, look, I'm not a Shomer Chinam, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. If you want to leave your cow with me at your own risk, that's fine, But yeah, I'm not doing the whole Shomer Chinam thing. So in that case, Betzim, okay, that's the stipulation that they made, and when he leaves the cow there, he leaves it there knowing that there's not going to be any swearing involved. But again, he's not a Shomer Chinam. He makes it clear that he's not, sure he'll watch it, but not as a Shomer Chinam, just as, somebody who's doing his friend a favor. Tane umasne Shomer, so it says Shomer Sacher, but there's a different gears that changes it to Shomer Chinam, which I like a little bit better. It makes it a little bit more extreme. So let's read that. Umasne Shomer Chinam lios kishoyel, and a Shomer Chinam can make a Tanai that he wants to be like a shoyel, I guess, to be stringent upon himself. All right, that'll be chai for everything. B'mai b'dvarim, what? Just by saying so? I guess it seems that just saying so would not be enough. Shmuel says b'shakanu b'yado. Shmuel says, well, they made a kinyan on it. I guess they made like a kinyan chalifin or a kinyan suder. Kielu. He got the Balabais gave him I guess the Balabais probably gave him a handkerchief and he picked it up, or maybe the opposite. Maybe the watchman gave. No, I imagine it's probably the watchman, that the Balabais gave the watchman a cloth, and he picked it up and officially accepted upon himself that he was going to be chayav for everything like a shoyl. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yochanan says, even if they didn't make a kinyan on it, that this shomer chinam, who accepts upon himself to be chayiv for everything like a shoyl, it's with that satisfaction that people he's going to have this reputation that he's such a good guy that even as a shomer chinam he accepted all responsibility upon himself. So that benefit to his reputation is enough to make it official. Okay, again, the Abaye Anoya with that benefit, Nafik Leikala, that his reputation is going to go out, the Inish Mehemno, that he's a very trustworthy person, that even as a Shomer Chinam, he accepts upon himself all of the responsibilities as though he was a Shoyl, who Gomer Mishabed Nafshe, so he accepts the responsibility of the shoyl officially in that capacity. So the Mishnah had concluded by saying that in order for a condition, for a Tanai to be valid, it has to be doable. It can't be ridiculous. It can't be silly. This is the opinion of Yehuda ben Tema. That even though it's actually a stipulation that is impossible to actually fulfill, but nonetheless, it was stipulated. The Tanai is still valid. Now, obviously, we're talking about things that are impossible to actually do. So obviously, it will never hit the point where the action will be actionable because the condition is impossible to be fulfilled. But, okay, so the action will never be actionable. Fine. The Tanya is learned by Sareza Gitech. A husband says to a wife, here is your get. Under the condition that you go up to the heaven. Okay, that's crazy. That you go down to the abyss. That you swallow a reed of 100 amas. That you walk across the great ocean. Okay, obviously these conditions are ridiculous. They're undoable. They're impossible. But all that means is that, okay, then the get will never be triggered. Will never be able to be applied. That's all it means. So niskayim atnai, I raise a get. Lo niskayim atnai, ain't no get. Look, if somehow you can manage to do the impossible, okay, well then she'll be divorced. But assuming that she's unable to do the impossible, then she won't be divorced. The condition is still there, even if it's impossible and ridiculous, so long as it is not fulfilled, and it will inevitably remain that way, that indefinitely remain that way. But so the get is not a get. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, cause a get. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says, no way. If you're going to make a ridiculous stipulation like that, forget it. We're going to ignore it. So the stipulation is ignored, and the get is a get. Klal Omer Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says in general, any condition that will ultimately be impossible to fulfill, and yet you make it you make it your condition. Enu ela kimafliga, you're just being stupid, v'chosher, and the action is going to be valid. Meaning he's just trying to be annoying, but the says Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema that the actual condition is going to be irrelevant. Rav Nachman, Rav halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Rav Nachman says in the Rav that the halacha is taklik Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. Rav Nachman by Yitzchok. Rav Nachman by Yitzchok maslis nami deka, that we can also infer it from our Mishnah. The Katanis, it says kol she'efshir lo l'kaimo besofo. Anything that is possible, any condition that is possible to be implemented, visna olam mitchiloso to no kaim, so it's a valid condition to make. But if it's an impossible condition, the implication being that, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, that if it is an impossible condition to know batal, then the Tanai is going to be batal. Shmamina, we'll come back to you. That was a gewaltige parak. And now, we will begin the next parak. Hashoyel es hapare. Hashoyel es hapare, somebody who borrows a cow. Okay, so a shoyel, gewaldig, a borrower. Great. Now, so we're going to be talking more about shomrim. Okay, so now, the thing with a borrower, there's an interesting halacha when it comes to a borrower. Now, what do the psukim say by a borrower? It says, V'chi, do we have all the psukim that I'm looking for over here? Okay, yeah, that looks good. Okay, fine. Yeah, that looks good. V'chi yishal ish me'imre eyu. I'm reading the pasuk. I'm looking for Ansari down on the page, whatever. I'm just going to read the pasuk quickly. V'chi yishal ish me'imre eyu. That if somebody borrows from his fellow, v'nishbar omeis, and the animal breaks or it dies, some kind of ones happens. So bailov ein imo shalim yishalim. So of course we know that a shoyel is chayiv for onsin. However, the pasuk doesn't say that the shoyel is always chayiv for onsin. Bailov ein imo shalim yishalim. The pasuk says that if the owner of the animal is not with him, so then, yeah, he's chayiv for onsin. But the next pasuk says in bailov imo, that if the didn't I? Alright, whatever. I think it's fine. But oh gosh, it's probably gonna happen again. Every 5 minutes, I'm gonna get another. Oh, dag nabbit. Alright, whatever. Sorry, it's gonna be distracting for you because I have this notification that's probably gonna pop up 3 more times. Anyways, where were we? So v'imbail of imo lo yishalim. But if the owner of the cow was with him, lo yishalim, then he doesn't have to pay. Im sochiru b'schar b'seder. Wait, one second. What do I do about these notifications? Wait, these are going to drive me crazy. 1 second. I think maybe I'll just try and dismiss them as they come up. Okay, so there's this interesting halacha when it comes to a shoyel. So of course a shoyel is chayiv for onsin. But there's this interesting halacha that actually if the person we borrowed from, the balabais, let's call him, or the mash'il, the lender, is with him, so then he doesn't have to pay. And what does it mean that the mash'il is with him? It means that he's working for him. So meaning if the shoel, let's use Reuven and Shimon, fine. So Reuven is the borrower, is the shoel, Shimon is the mash'il, is the lender. So Reuven borrows Shimon's cow, and then he hires Shimon to work. So let's say Reuven has a field or something, and he needs to plow his field, and he's borrowing Reuven's cow, and then he also asks, Reuven has a field, he borrows Shimon's cow, and then he also asks Shimon if Shimon can volunteer to help him out, or even he hires Shimon, he pays Shimon to help him with the cow. So if Shimon, who owns the cow, is working with Reuven, or for Reuven, and then the cow, an ones happens, it drops dead, so actually Reuven will be potter. So when we say that a shoyel is chayiv for onsin, it's bail of ein imo shalim mishalim. If the owner is not with him, so then he's chayiv for onsin. But if the owner is with him, so then he's going to be potter for onsin. And when it says that the owner is with him, it means that the owner is working for him. And when the owner is working for him, it means that he's working for him from the time of the borrowing. When Reuven became a shoyel, when he started borrowing the cow, at that point already it was stipulated that Shimon was going to work for him. But if he borrowed the cow and then later on he says to Shimon, hey Shimon, can you help me out? That would not be considered bail of imo. Okay, with having said all of that, here we go. Ashoyel es hapar. So somebody borrows a cow. So Reuven borrows Shimon's cow. V'shal baileo imo. And also he says, hey, and Shimon, can you also help me with the cow, work the field, he's renting the cow to plow the field. Can you plow the field with the cow? Do whatever work you need to do with it. And I guess he asked Shimon to volunteer. Or he paid Shimon as a worker. Okay. Where am I? Okay, so he borrows the cow and also the owner of the cow. or if he had first asked Shimon if he could work, if Shimon can help Reuven, Reuven asked Shimon if he could help him, Reuven, on his field, or Sachron, or he hired Shimon to work his field, and then afterwards he borrowed the cow, which means that at the time that he borrowed the cow, Shimon was already working for him. Umesa, and then the cow dies, which is ones, potter. So Taka Reuven is going to be potter, even though he's a shoyl, he's going to be potter. Shenemar and Baalavima lo yishalim, as the pasuk says, that if the owner is with him, and that means that the owner is working for him at the time that he borrowed it, so then lo yishalim, he doesn't have to pay. Aval shoal es apare, but if Reuven borrowed Shimon's cow, v'achar kach shoal es abayim, then only afterwards he asked Shimon if Shimon can help him out in his field, o scharin, or he hired Shimon after the fact, v'mesa, and the animal died, chayav, then Reuven will be chayiv because he's a shoylis chayiv for onsen shnema ba'alev einimo shalim mishalim. That if the ba'alim, if the owner is not with him, well then he has to pay, and that means that the owner was not working for him at the time of the borrowing. Now, fracting gemara midigatoni seifa va'achar kach shoal es hapara, from the fact that Yep, there's a second one. Okay, let's hope we can get rid of it. Good. And then I don't think that there should be any more notifications actually. Okay, midikatani seva v'achar kach shoal es ha-pare. Okay, from the fact that the seifa of the ratio, right, that the second case in the Mishnah was that he first hired Shimon and afterwards borrowed his cow, which means at the time that he borrowed the cow, Shimon was already working for Reuven. Michal the ratio, which means that the first case in the Mishnah, the katoni ima mamish, that when it says that he hired Shimon together with the borrowing of the cow, means that mamish punked at the same time that he borrowed the cow, he oichit hired Shimon. Ima mamish mimishkachasa, but is that really practically speaking possible? To borrow the cow at the same time that he hires Shimon? Parba mishichu v'alim ba'amira. After all, the Baalim, the owner, Shimon, would start working for Reuven when they verbally say, agree that Shimon's going to work for Reuven. But in terms of the actual borrowing, that happens later when he makes a Meshicha on the cow. So practically speaking, how is it possible that the employment is going to begin at the same time of the borrowing of the cow? Well, there's two possibilities that the Gemara suggests. Well, if the cow was already in the chotzer of Reuven, in Reuven's chotzer, so the cow's in the chotzer, and I guess Reuven and Shimon are talking in the chotzer, and they say, hey, and Reuven says to Shimon, hey Shimon, why don't you come work for me and I'll borrow your cow, and then punkt at the same time, since it's already in his chotzer, so his chotzer is kone, so then he doesn't need to do a kinyan meshicha, and just right then when they agree, Reuven begins borrowing the cow, and Shimon begins working for Reuven. In that case, Reuven doesn't actually have to do a meshicha. Alternatively, the amrle ad gufach lo tishoel ad, or maybe as gufcha lo tishoel, or ad guf, I don't know, as gufcha lo tishoel ad shas meshichas parascha. That you will only, right, you're not going to begin your employment now when we're talking, rather only when I do a kinyan meshicha on the cow. At that point, you will begin working for me. So those are two ways that the employment and the borrowing of the cow can happen at the same time. Okay, fine. Here we go. Now we're going to get into the Dalid Shomrim and the responsibilities. Gewaldige stuff. This is so yesodistic. It's so basic to BavaMetzia and even BavaKama. And here we go. Perik HaShoyel Sapora. We also got into it a shtickle at the end of Perik HaSocher Saprialim, right, with the Daled Shomrim. Here we go. Tanan, we learned at the end of Socher Saprialim in the Mishnah that we learned, was it yesterday? Yep, yesterday. Arba Shemrim Haim. There are four types of Shomrim. Shomer Chinam, VaShoyel, Nesisacher VaSocher. You have an unpaid custodian, a borrower, a paid custodian, and a renter. Shomer Chinam, when it comes to a unpaid custodian, Nishba al Akol. Okay, as we learned, right? he's potter for everything so long as he swears that he was not negligent. And the shoyel is the most strict because he gets all of the benefit, right? The borrower gets all of the benefit. The lender gains nothing by lending out his cow. And therefore, the borrower, who gets all of the benefit, also has the highest level of responsibility and accountability. So he has to pay for anything, even ones. No say, socher v'asocher, when it comes to a shomer socher or a renter, well, nishboyen ala shvur v'ala shvuya v'ala mesa, when it comes to ones, whether it breaks or it gets taken captive or dies, so it's ones, so a shomer socher and a socher are potter for ones so long as they swear. And they're chayiv for gneva v'aveda, they would have to pay. How do we know this? 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 We've been talking about this for ages, that there's the 4 shomrim and the different levels of responsibility. How do we know this? There are 3 consecutive parshas in Parshas Mishpatim. Parsha number 1 talks about Shomer Chinam. The following one talks about, right, the first one talks about Shomer Chinam, the second one talks about Shomer Socher, and the third one talks about a shoyel. So Bishlama Shlishis B'Shoyel Meforish. So I understand why we'd say that the third parsha is talking about a shoyel, because it says it's talking about a shoyel. V'chi yishal ish mimre'eu v'nishbar omez ba'le benimo shalim yishalim. So it says explicitly in that parsha, v'chi yishal, that we're talking about a shoyel. And it says shal, right? And it says he's even chayiv for onsin. So clearly that one's talking about a shoyel. But how do we know that the first one's talking about a shomer chinam and the second one's talking about a shomer socher? Maybe it's taka fakert. Maybe the first one's talking about a shomer socher and the second one's talking about a shomer chinam. Now, obviously, a shomer socher is more stringent than a shomer chinam, right? I mean, logically, we know that shomer chinam, an unpaid custodian, is going to be the sort of most lenient of the bunch. A shomer socher, a paid custodian, is going to be more stringent than an unpaid custodian and have more responsibility than an unpaid custodian. But still, the depositor is still getting benefit in that his thing is being watched, right? But the borrower, however, the shoyel, he has the the highest level of responsibility. So that's sort of accepted, right? That shomer chinam is the most lenient, shomer socher is in the middle, and shoyel has the most responsibility. Now, we're saying that the first parsha is about shomer chinam. Now, in the first parsha, we say that be'etzem, he just has to swear that he's not negligent. He's only chayiv for posheh. He just swears that he's not negligent, and then he's potter. In the second parsha, it says that he's chayiv for gneva va'aveda. So therefore, we initially want to say that, the first parsha is potter for everything as long as he swears. The second parsha is chayiv for gneva va'aveda. So clearly, the first parsha is more lenient, and therefore that must be the shomer chinam. The second parsha is more stringent because he's chayiv in for gneva va'aveda. Therefore, that must be the one for shomer socher. But as we've seen in the past, there is an interesting quirk. There's an interesting quirk, and that quirk is that in the first parsha, where you're potter for everything so long as you swear, there's an interesting quirk, which is that if you do swear, if you exploit this leniency dishonestly, and you lie and you swear falsely that it was stolen, but witnesses come and say, no, it wasn't stolen, meaning in the first parsha, for gneva va'aveda, you're potter so long as you swear. But if you swear falsely, and witnesses come, right, toin tainas ganif, witnesses come and say, hey, you swore falsely, you took it yourself, he has to pay kefel. So that's the interesting quirk. None of the other, in the second parsha, where you're chayiv for gneva va'aveda, okay, so you're chayiv for gneva va'aveda, you're chayiv to pay the principal, the keren, the principal. But in the first parsha, where we say that you're potter for Gneva Vaveda, as long as you swear, but if it turns out that you swear falsely, then you have to pay kefel, double payment, which, by the second parsha where you're chayav for Gneva Vaveda, you don't have to pay double payment, you pay single payment. Whereas over here, by the first parsha, there's a potential to pay double payment. So maybe we could argue that actually the first parsha is more stringent than the second parsha, since there's the potential for double payment. Ho ho. So again, so Adrabah, fakert. I'll say Rishona b'somer sacher. Wait, where am I? Ipuchana. Oh, I'm sorry. Where was that? Where am I? Shni b'somer sacher. Ipuchana. So we say, wait, maybe I'll flip it around and I'll say that the first parsha is by a shomer sacher and the second parsha is by a shomer chinam. We say no. Mistaver shniya b'shomer sacher. It makes sense that the second parsha is talking about shomer sacher. Shekein chai b'gneva va'aveda. Because in the second parsha is chai for gneva va'aveda, whereas the first parsha is potter for gneva va'aveda. So therefore it makes sense that the first parsha where it's potter for gneva va'aveda is shomer chinam. The second parsha where it's chai for gneva va'aveda is shomer sacher. Adrabah. The Gemara says no, but I can argue fakert. Rishona b'shomer sacher, that the first parsha is talking about shomer sacher because the first parsha is the more stringent of them. Shekein mishalim tashlumei kefil b'toyin tanis ganef, because granted, in the first parsha, he can swear that it was stolen and be potter, but if it turns out that he's lying, he has to pay kefel, which is more stringent than a shomer sacher, than the second parsha, where he'd have to pay for gneva vaveda, but only Karen. But no, afilu achi, even so, the second parsha is still considered more stringent, and therefore befitting the shomer sacher. Afilu achi, even so, karna below shvue, in the second parsha, where by default, by Gneva Va'aveda, you are going to be chayav Karen, the principal amount, by default, and there's no way around that. Adifa, that is more stringent, mikfila b'shvua, than the possibility for kefel in the event that you are dishonest. Meaning by default, in the first parsha, you're potter for Gneva Va'aveda as long as you swear. That's considered to be more lenient than the second parsha, where by default you're chayav for Gneva Va'aveda no matter what. Now, granted, in the first parsha, there is the potential that if you're dishonest and you swear falsely, then yes, it could lead to kefel, but that's only sort of like, that's like twice removed, and only in a case where a person is dishonest and exploits the situation in a dishonest way. But by default, if we just go based on defaults, then the first parsha is more lenient than the second parsha, and therefore the first parsha is by shomer chinam, and the second parsha is by shomer sacher. Teda deha shoyel, right? So teda, and you should know that this is the case. I'll prove to you that this is true. That the first parsha is more lenient than the second parsha. That the default of being potter for gneva va'aveda is more lenient than the default of being chayav for gneva va'aveda, even though in the first case you could potentially end up with kefel, because the hashoyel kol hanoya shelo, because let's use the sort of the decider, or the sort of let's try to get more insight over here from a shoyel. A borrower kol hanoya shelo, all benefit is his, meaning, right, the lender gains nothing by lending out his item to the borrower, and therefore the borrower has the highest level of responsibility, and therefore let's take a look at how the borrower is chayiv. Is he chayiv like the first parsha, or is he chayiv like the second parsha? Because however he's chayiv is going to be the more stringent way. Ve'eino mishalim ela Karen. And the halacha by a shoyel is that by gneva va'aveda he is chayiv the principal amount. We do not say by a shoyel that he's potter for gneva va'aveda, but if he lies falsely, he'll be chayiv kefel. We don't say that. Rather, by default, a shoyel is chayiv for gneva va'aveda, which means clearly that from the fact that that's the halacha by a shoyel, that is the more stringent. That is the more stringent one, and therefore we will say that the first parsha where you're potter for gneva va'aveda is by shomer chinam. The second parsha where you're chayiv for gneva va'aveda is a shomer sacher, and the third parsha, which explicitly mentions the shoyel, is obviously talking about the shoyel. But is that really true that all of the benefit goes to the borrower? The borrower is responsible to feed the animal. That doesn't sound so beneficial to the borrower, that now he's got to spend money to feed the animal. Dikaima ba'agam. Well, you could say that the animal is in the swamp where there's like plenty of grass to eat, so he doesn't actually have to pay. V'baya natira, but he's going to have to guard the animal, watch the animal. Binatar mata. Well, you could say that, that it's talking about a place where there's like a security guard who's responsible to take care of all the livestock and keep everybody safe and all the animals safe. So therefore, it doesn't actually really have to do that either. Okay, fine. So a shoyl is considered kol anaya shelo. V'bay seima lo tema kol anaya shelo ela ema rov anaya shelo. Alternatively, don't say that by a shoyl all of the benefit is his. That's true. Not all of the benefit is his. Yeah, maybe he has to pay for food. Maybe he has to guard it. But most of the benefit is his. He gets to use the animal for free. V'bay seima alternatively b'shelas kelim. Alternatively, if we're talking about if you borrow vessels, I don't know, like if you borrow a ladder or something like that. Well, you don't have to feed the ladder. You don't really have to guard the ladder. So, that would be an example of kol anaya shelo. No se socher ve'asocher nishboin ala shvura v'ala shvuya v'ala mesa. Did I just? Oops. Again, no se socher ve'asocher. Okay, so a shomer socher and a socher. Let's just talk about a shomer socher. It's easier to just talk about one of them, especially because the socher is machlokas. Nishboin al hashvura v'ala shvuya v'ala mesa. So if by ones that it breaks or it is taken captive or dies by ones, so they swear that, meaning they're pater so long as they swear. But they're chayiv for gneva v'aveda. B'shlama gneva, okay, I understand why shomer sacher is chayiv for gneva. D'chsivim ganov yiganev me'imo yishalem levanov. That if it is surely stolen from him, he has to pay. So where am I? So bishlam gneva dichsev im ganav yiganev me'imo yishal mevalov. Right. So by gneva it says im ganav yiganev, if it's stolen, he has to pay. Okay, so we see that he's chayiv for gneva. And aveda minolan. How do we know that a shomer sacher is chayiv for aveda? The Tanya is we learn in a brayse im ganav yiganev enli el gneva aveda minayin. That if it is surely stolen, so all I know about is Geneva. How do we know that also Aveda is chayiv for? Tamlomer im ganov yiganev mikol makom. It says if it is surely stolen, double lashon, so that comes to include whether it's stolen or whether it is lost. Hanicha lemando amar lo aminon dibetor kolashon bnei adam. So this makes sense. Wait, what? Yeah. So this makes sense if you say let's go back there for a second. Lemando amar aminon dibetor kolashon bnei adam ma'ikol meimar. Meaning if there's a machlokes, right? One opinion is that when it says im ganav yiganev, it's not to learn out anything fancy. It's not to say they're even chayiv for aveda. No, that's just the way that the way that the Torah writes. Im ganav yiganev, right? It's just the way that it's written. But you can't learn out anything special from there. So I understand according to the opinion who says that from im ganav yiganev you can learn out aveda beseder. But there is an opinion who says ganav yiganev is just a regular way that people talk and that the Torah records it. But you can't actually learn out Aveda, so then how do you know Aveda? So ma'ikal lemema, so what would you say? So my Rav, they say in Eretz Yisrael, kal v'chomer, well, you can make a kal v'chomer. Uma geneva, shekrova la'ones, mishalim, well, if a shomer sacher is chayiv for geneva, theft, and theft is close on the spectrum to being like ones, it got stolen from you. It's not necessarily an ones, but it's closer to being an ones, and yet, a shomer sacher is chayiv. So aveda shekrova lepshia. Well, if it gets lost, which is kind of more on the spectrum towards negligence, lo kol shekain, certainly you should be chayiv. He's chayiv for gneva, which is kind of close to ones. Well, then certainly he's chayiv for aveda, which is kind of close to poshea. V'idach, and what about according to the first opinion, who says that we learn it out from im ganov yiganev? So what about the fact that we can learn it out from a kal v'chomer? Yeah, something that you could have theoretically learned out from a kal v'chomer. The pasuk, the Torah writes it anyways, and it says, "I'm going to teach that a shomer sacher is not chayiv just for gneva, but also for aveda." V'ashoyel mishalem es akol, and we say that a shoyel has to pay for everything, including ones. So bishlam shvura umesa dichsiv v'chiyishal ish meimre eu v'nishbar omes. So Right, so we said that a shoyl has to pay for everything. So let's read that again. So b'shlom shvura umeisa. So I understand if it breaks or if it dies. It says that explicitly in the pasuk. V'chayishal ish mimre'eu by a shoyl v'nishbar omeis, and it breaks or it dies. Ela shvuya b'shoyl minolim. But the pasuk by a shoyl, it says so by a shomer sacher, but not by a shoyl. By a shoyl, it doesn't say shvuya, that it's taken captive. So how do we know that a shoyl is chai for that as well? And if you're going to say nelef mishvura umeisa, well, let's learn it out from the fact that the pasuk does mention shvura umeisa by a shoyl, and ma shvura umeisa. And when it comes to shvura, no, I'm sorry. And if you're going to say, well, just like you're chayiv for shvura umesa, well, then we'll just say, well, just like you're chayiv for those, you're also chayiv for shvuya, and that's that. But that's not such a good proof, because I can argue man the shvura umesa sheken onsa the salik adaito. The fact that it might break or die is something that should be top of mind for the borrower when he's borrowing it. And it should be something that if he wanted to be patur for, he should have made some kind of a stipulation at the time that he borrowed it, but he didn't, which means that he accepted upon himself responsibility for them. But tomar b'shvuya sheken onsa delo salik adaito. But the fact that it will be taken captive, unfortunately, we know about people don't necessarily think about the possibility that something so crazy as people taking captives is something that's top of mind. So therefore, shvuya is not something that the shoyl was necessarily thinking of at the time of that he borrowed the cow. So therefore, you can argue, look, I understand why you'd be chayiv for shvura and mesa, because that's the shoyl's own fault for not making some kind of a condition for being potter there. So if he didn't make a condition, he's going to be chayiv. But shvuya, who would have thought to have to say, oh yeah, and if it gets taken captive, well then I'll be potter. No, maybe because it's not something that people are thinking about. Maybe that's why he didn't make a stipulation about it. Maybe he should be taka potter. So ella nemar shvura umeisa b'shoyl v'nemar shvura umeisa b'shomer sacher. Well, it says shvura umesa by a shoyl, and it also says shvura umesa by a shomer sacher. So let's say malaholin shvuya imo. Well, just like by a shomer sacher, it's not just shvura and mesa; it's shvuya and mesa. So afkan shvuya imo. So here also by the shoyl, where it only says shvura umesa, but it'll include shvuya, just like by shomer sacher it includes shvuya. But ikal mifrach. But that's not so simple. You can ask the question, look, ma l'shomer sacher shekain liftor. By shomer sacher, when it mentions shvura, shvuya, and mesa, it's to say that the shomer sacher is potter for those, right? He's potter for ones, whereas by the shoyl it's to say that he's chayiv. And what's the difference? Well, when it comes to being potter, so we're saying by shomer sacher he's potter if it breaks, or if it dies, which are things that he could have even thought about milichatchila, and he didn't make any kind of stipulation, and still he's potter for them. And kavachomer is going to be potter for shvuya, which is something that he wouldn't have even thought about milichatchila. So it makes sense to say that just like by shvura and mesa he's potter, and also by shvuya he's potter. But by shoyl, we're talking saying that he's chayav. And going back to the argument that we made before, I'll argue that look, he's chayav for shvura and mesa, which are things that he should have thought about to make a stipulation about to be potter if he cared about it, if he cared to be potter, and if he didn't, it's his fault. But I could make that argument that by shvuya is something that he wouldn't have thought about, so they should talk to be potter for it. So Torah b'shol shekain l'chiyuv, would you say the same thing by shol, where we're saying that he's chayiv for these things? Maybe not. Ela k'Reb Nosson. Rather, it's like Reb Nosson, the Tana that we learn in the Brayso. Reb Nosson Omer says, Reb Nosson, l'rabois shvuya, that when it says, what does it say? V'nishbar o meis. So nishbar is shvura. Meis is mesa. And o comes to include shvuya. El Reb Nosson said, Reb Nosson, the time that we learned in the Brayso, Reb Nosson Omer says, Reb Nosson, o l'rabos shvuya. That the word o comes to include a shvuya. But fact the Gemara, hi o, mi bayle l'chalik. 1 second. We need the o, not to include shvuya, but to say that it's not both of them. Meaning, I could argue when it says, right, V'nishbar omes, meaning I might have the hab to say that it has to break and die. Therefore, we have the word O to say, no, it's not both, it's either or. So O isn't coming to include shvuya, it's coming to say that it's either or, not both. We need O to say that it's either or. It's either it breaks or it dies. I may have thought to say, Ad misbira umesa. No mechayiv. I may have thought that by a sharli is only mechayiv if it breaks and dies, but not either or. Kamash Milan. Therefore it says O to say it is either or. So it's not coming to include shvuya, it's coming to say either or. Hanichal Rabbi Yonasan. Okay, well, I can understand how O comes to include shvuya according to Rabbi Yonasan. What about according to Rabbi Yoshe? The Tana is willing to buy say ish asher yikalel es oviv ve'es imo. We're going to learn about this in Masechta Sanhedrin, which is coming up in 2 Masechtas from now. That if a person curses his father and his mother, so eni elo oviv ve'imo. So so I would only know if he curses his father and his mother, both of them. Oviv below imo, imo below oviv minayin. How do I know that if he only curses one of them, he's chayiv misa? Tamalomar. Therefore, the pasuk says, Oviv v'imo kilel. His father and his mother he cursed. So, meaning the first part says ish asher yikalel es oviv. So we juxtapose yikalel and oviv. So cursing your father, and then in the second, then we say oviv v'imo kilel. We juxtapose imo and kilel. So we have kilel next to father and kilel next to mother. So kilel imo. So kilel oviv. We're oviv kilel imo kilel. Divrei Rabbi Yoshe. So we learn that no, he doesn't have to curse both of them. Even if he curses either one, he's going to be chayiv. So according to Rabbi Yoshe, we needed a special pasuk, we needed a special drash to learn that even individually is chayiv. Because by default, says Rabbi Yoshe, I would have assumed that we'd have to curse both of them. Therefore, I have Aviv Mokil to say, rather then we ultimately learn out that even if he only curses one of them, he's chayiv. Whereas Rabbi Yonasan Omer, mashma shneim ke'echad umashne echad b'fnei atzmo. Rabbi Yonasan says he's more chilled out. He says no, it can imply both of them together, either or. It includes both. Until the pasuk specifically says that it has to be done together. So long as the pasuk doesn't for example, right? Right, the pasuk says don't plow with an ox and a donkey together. When something needs to be done together, it doesn't mean don't plow with either a donkey or an ox. No, it says together. You have to, right? It's only a problem if you plow with a donkey and an ox zusammen together. So when the pasuk needs for something to be together, it'll tell you that it has to be together. If it doesn't specifically say together, it means either or. So therefore, based on the way that Rabbi Yonasan learns that it's by definition either or, so then by the shoyel, when it says v'nishbar omes, well, by definition, I don't need O to teach me either or. I know already it's always either or. So what's O coming to teach? O is coming to teach shvuya as well. But what about according to Rabbi Yoshia, who says that no, by definition, by default, I don't assume that it's either or. So then I would argue that I need O to teach me either or. So then how do I know shvuya? Well, I feel the tamer Rabbi Yoshia. You can even say it's Rabbi Yoshia, because in this particular case, by definition, it means either or. I don't need a special drash to teach me either or. It's obvious that it's either or because I feel the tamer Rabbi Yoshia l'chalek hacha lo tzarich. Rabbi Yoshia says we don't need O to say either or here. My time outcome svaru. It's logical. Malikot lekula, malikot lepaga. Basically, breaking and dying is the same thing, right? Breaking is just like partial dying. Breaking is like partial death. So it's all basically the same thing. So yeah, sure, you're chayiv if you kill it fully, you're chayiv if you kill it partially. You don't need either or in that case. Of course, it's all basically killing. So you can be chayiv for killing. And then what's the O doing over there? We don't need it to teach either or. We know that logically. So what's the O? It's coming to include shvuya. Wow. Whew. Okay, that was Haftzari Daled. Oh, Masechta BavaMetzia. I'm exhausted. Okay. The first we finished up the previous parak. We talked about some interesting stuff about masna mashakos b'Torah and different ways of making stipulations. You have to make the condition before the action. particularly according to a mayor. And what happens if you have a condition that's completely impossible and irrelevant? So we had said in our Mishnah that it's ignored. So Machlokas Tanakam and Yehuda ben Tema. Okay, and then we get to, we started the Perek HaShoyel, which is super interesting. We talked about borrowing an animal and how if the owner is with it, working with it since the time that it was borrowed, so then actually by Shoyel you would be potter, even though generally we assume that Shoyel is chai for everything and is the most stringent of the Shomim. But if the owner is there, then he's going to be potter. And then we got into learning about the 4 Shomim and from the Parshas where we learned them out and what they're chai for. Peace out.